Today, we're going to discuss a commercial litigation matter that the firm handled a few years ago, where we represented a medical professional who had been sued by a commercial lender. Several years earlier, our client had been performing spinal surgeries on his patients and submitting bills for those surgeries to various insurance companies, which led to the creation of accounts receivables. At some point in time, he was approached by a commercial lender who offered to finance those receivables. That lender ultimately became the plaintiff in a lawsuit in Nassau Supreme Court in the commercial division titled Image Elite Capital versus Blumenthal. And we represented all the defendants in that case. The case ultimately went through litigation, through discovery. We used experts, and the case went to trial where we prevailed. After a round of meetings, the lender and our client ultimately entered into a transaction where our client borrowed roughly $400,000 and used $2 million of aged accounts receivables as collateral for the advance. At some point early in the collection process, the lawyers who had been representing our client moved the files at the direction of the lender to a different collection group who had other receivables of our client that were not financed. So the same law firm ended up with funded secured receivables and unfunded unsecured receivables. This unfortunately led to the dispute, which led to the lawsuit and ultimately the trial. And the issue primarily appeared to be whether or not my client had received funds that should properly have gone to the lender. When the lender brought the lawsuit, they asserted claims of fraud, breach of contract, quantum merit, and the fraud claims were essentially based on what they considered to be misrepresentations by our clients about the value or nature of the receivables that were securing the loan. The lender ultimately brought a civil lawsuit in the commercial division of Nassau Supreme Court, alleging breach of the security agreement, breach of the finance agreement, fraud in the inducement, and fraud based on misrepresentations made to the lender prior to entering into the transaction. The case was heavily litigated. Many depositions were conducted. Both parties retained experts, and the case ultimately went to trial before Judge Timothy Driscoll in Nassau Supreme Court. The case went to trial, and the defendants won every count at trial. It was a complete defendant's verdict, and that verdict was primarily based on the cross-examination of the plaintiff and the defendant's effective ability to bring out testimony and evidence which demonstrated that the plaintiff had in fact been defrauded by his own collection lawyers. In the course of discovery, we discovered that the lawyers representing the plaintiff in their collections against the various insurance companies had actually been disbarred for misappropriating funds and embezzling clients' funds, including the plaintiff in this case. We ultimately were able to show before the court that the losses that the plaintiff was attributing to our client were in fact cases where the money had been received and not dispersed by his own lawyers. We were also able to show that the commercial lender was negligent in the way that they managed their own paperwork, the way that they stored documents, and their ability to effectively introduce documents and evidence of the underlying transaction. Our client was ultimately successful through a combination of good litigation strategy, proper and effective discovery techniques, and effective and zealous advocacy at trial. The court ultimately ruled in our favor on all counts. The case was preliminarily appealed, and ultimately we were able to persuade the plaintiff's counsel to abandon the appeal and ultimately accept the loss, as it may be. The client was made whole. There was an award of attorney's fees in his favor based on language in the contract, and we achieved the best result possible.